The dust of the Kandahar basin tasted of iron and grit, a fine red powder that coated everything, including the inside of Dr. Aerys Thorne's mouth. She stood before the main gate of Forward Operating Base Jericho, a small, unassuming woman in practical khaki trousers and a sweat-stained linen shirt. Her graying hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and the glasses perched on her nose seemed too delicate for the harsh, overexposed world around her. She looked like a misplaced librarian, not a priority-level consultant for the Department of Defense.
The guard in the sandbagged watchtower tracked her with the barrel of his M240B. Below, at the steel concertina wire gate, a young sergeant with a jaw full of chewing tobacco and an ego full of air leaned against the concrete barrier. His name tag read Cole. "ID," he grunted, not bothering to make eye contact. He was looking past her at the heat shimmering off the asphalt of the access road. Aerys presented her laminated DoD civilian identification. Cole took it, glanced at it for a fraction of a second, and handed it back with a smirk. "Logistics analyst from the Pentagon?" he said, sounding like it was a diagnosis of a terminal disease. "You don't have an escort, ma'am." "My orders state I'm to report directly to the TOC upon arrival," Aerys said, her voice calm and even, betraying no hint of the 12-hour flight or the bone-jarring ride from the airfield. "Colonel Madsen is expecting me." "The colonel's a busy man," Cole drawled, shifting his weight. "He's running a war, not a book club. You wait here. Someone from G4 will come get you when they have a minute." He gestured vaguely toward a metal bench baking under the relentless sun, 100 feet away. "Could be 10 minutes, could be 2 hours. Enjoy the view." Aerys didn't move. "Sergeant, my clearance is level 5, top secret SCI. My orders have a triple alpha priority cipher attached. You are required to scan my credentials and verify them against the Jade system, at which point you will be instructed to grant me immediate unescorted access." Cole finally looked at her, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. He saw a woman in her late 40s, soft around the edges, with hands that had never held a rifle. He saw a bureaucrat. "Ma'am, I know the rules. Priority ciphers are for generals and spooks, not for people who analyze supply chains. The system's probably just bugged. Now please, step over to the waiting area. You're in my field of fire." The condescension was a thick, syrupy thing meant to put her in her place. It was a language she understood intimately. She had heard it spoken in different accents, in different uniforms for over 2 decades. It never changed. The words were always the same. "You don't belong here." "Sergeant," she said, her voice dropping a fraction of a degree, losing its polite edge. "Your name is Cole. You're 22 years old from Omaha, Nebraska. You have 17 months in country. You scored expert on your last rifle qualification, but your squad leader noted a tendency toward overconfidence that has, on 2 separate occasions, nearly compromised your fire team's position during patrols. You are to scan my ID now." Cole's jaw stopped moving. The smirk vanished, replaced by a sullen, confused glare. He didn't know how she knew that. It was in his file, sure, but his file was just data on a server thousands of miles away. It wasn't something a logistics analyst should be able to pull up in her head. For a moment, he wavered. Doubt crept in. Then his pride reasserted itself. He was a soldier. She was a civilian. This was his gate. "That's it," he snapped, his voice tight with anger. "You want to play games? Fine, you can wait. I'm not checking anything until I get a direct order from the TOC. You can take it up with the colonel when your escort finally arrives." He turned his back on her, a deliberate final act of dismissal, and spat a stream of brown juice onto the dust.
Aerys Thorne stood perfectly still. She didn't sigh. She didn't argue further. She simply reached into her worn leather satchel, pulled out a small, unassuming satellite phone, and dialed a number from memory. She didn't speak into it. She just pressed a single button, held it for 3 seconds, and ended the transmission. Then she put the phone away and waited.
her eyes fixed on the distant, jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush. She didn't look at the bench. She stood her ground, a silent, unmovable object in the oppressive heat. Less than 90 seconds later, the gate's internal comm system crackled to life with a sound so loud and furious it made Sergeant Cole jump. "Gate 1, this is Colonel Madsen. What in the goddamn hell is going on out there? I just got a call from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs himself. He wants to know why I'm detaining a Priority 1 asset." Cole's face went pale under his tan. He fumbled for his radio. "Sir, there's a civilian here, a logistics analyst. Is her name Dr. Thorne?" Madsen's voice was a roar of pure fury. "Yes! Then you open that gate, you render a salute, and you pray to whatever God you believe in that she doesn't file a report on your insubordination, because if she does, you will be cleaning latrines thoroughly until you retire. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Cole stammered, scrambling to the keypad. The heavy steel gate began to slide open with a hydraulic hiss. He turned to Aerys Thorne, his face a mask of horrified disbelief. He snapped to attention, his salute clumsy and panicked. Aerys simply walked past him, her worn boots making no sound on the gravel. She didn't acknowledge him, she didn't look at him. To her, he had already ceased to exist. The Tactical Operations Center, TOC, of FOB Jericho was a cavern of cold air and low, anxious humming. A dozen operators and analysts sat at tiered consoles, their faces illuminated by the green and blue glow of tactical displays. On the main screen, a satellite map of the province was overlaid with friendly and suspected enemy positions. Colonel Madsen stood in the center of the room, a bulldog of a man with a shaved head and a neck as thick as a tree trunk. He was radiating controlled fury. He turned as Aerys entered, his eyes sweeping over her with open disapproval. He saw exactly what Sergeant Cole had seen: a civilian, a woman, an academic, an outsider. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice clipped and formal. The earlier rage was now packed down into a dense core of resentment. "Welcome to Jericho. I apologize for the confusion at the gate." The apology was devoid of sincerity. "It was handled, Colonel," Aerys replied, her gaze already scanning the consoles, absorbing the flow of data, the status of the network, the energy of the room. "I'll be frank," Madsen continued, crossing his arms. "I read your file. Logistics, predictive analysis, resource allocation. Very impressive, I'm sure, but I have a fully staffed G4 section. My people know this AO. We have a critical operation spinning up in the next 24 hours. Frankly, Doctor, I don't have the time or the resources to babysit a civilian analyst from DC." The message was clear. She was a burden, a distraction. Major Evans, Madsen's XO, stood beside him. His expression was carefully neutral, but the Spectre team operators in the corner didn't bother to hide their smirks. They were hard men, bearded and tattooed, their gear worn and customized from years of kicking indoors. They saw her as a creature from another planet. "I understand your position, Colonel," Aerys said, her tone professional. "I'm here to observe and provide support, as directed by the Joint Staff. I require a console with access to the SIPRnet and the base's internal sensor grid." Madsen grunted and gestured dismissively to a small, isolated console in the darkest corner of the TOC. It was an auxiliary station, mostly used for running diagnostics. "There. Stay out of the main comms loop. Feed any observations you might have through Major Evans. He'll decide if they're worth my time." Aerys nodded once and walked to the console. It was an older model, its keyboard worn smooth. She sat down, placed her satchel beside her, and powered it on. The operators went back to their work. The brief interruption over, she was already being forgotten, a piece of furniture in the corner. For the next hour, Aerys worked in silence. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with a quiet, fluid efficiency. She wasn't just logging in, she was probing the system, mapping its architecture, feeling its rhythms. She found the dead-end subroutines, the ghost data from decommissioned sensors, the sloppy patches a lazy IT tech had installed months ago. She saw the vulnerabilities. The base's network was a fortress, but like any fortress, it had cracks in its walls. Colonel Madsen prided himself on running a tight ship, but his digital security was a mess of layered protocols, each one added in a hurry, creating unforeseen conflicts and backdoors. She noted them all, her expression unchanging. Major Evans walked over once, a courtesy check-in. "Everything you need, Doctor?" "Yes, thank you, Major," she said without looking up from the screen. "Find any inefficiencies in our supply requisitions?" he asked, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "I'm still compiling my initial assessment," she replied, her fingers never pausing. He lingered for a moment, watching the lines of code scroll past on her screen. It wasn't logistics data. It looked more like a raw diagnostic feed from the base's perimeter defense grid. He frowned, but before he could ask, Madsen called his name and he moved away. Aerys Thorne was left alone again. She pulled up the schematics for the base's power distribution network, then the schematics for its primary communications array, then the schematics for the old decommissioned analog phone lines that snaked beneath the foundations of the base, a relic from a pre-digital age that everyone had forgotten was even there. She traced their paths, committed them to memory, and then closed the files. She was a logistics analyst. She analyzed the flow of resources, and information she knew was the most critical resource of all. The smirks and the condescension didn't matter. The system mattered. The mission mattered. The storm was coming, and she was quietly, methodically building the ark.
The first sign of trouble was a flicker. On the main tactical display, the drone feed from a predator circling high above the Tangi Valley blinked out, replaced for a half-second by a screen of digital static. One of the drone operators swore under his breath and tapped at his console. "Jar 1, we've lost video link with Reaper 7, he announced, attempting to re-establish. Colonel Madsen glanced at the screen, his jaw tight. "Report. Still nothing, sir. It's not responding to commands. It's like it just vanished." Before anyone could process the implication, a second screen went dark, then a third. A cascade of failures swept through the TOC. Alarms, low and urgent, began to blare. Red warning icons bloomed across every monitor like a digital plague. "What's happening?" Madsen barked, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Comm status." A young lieutenant, his face beaded with sweat, frantically worked his controls. "Sir, I've lost all satellite uplinks. Primary and secondary channels are down. We're cut off. Switch to terrestrial comms. Get me Spectre team," Madsen ordered. Spectre, his elite recon unit, was out with a high-value convoy transporting captured enemy guidance systems. They were deep in the Tangi Valley, the most dangerous sector of the AO. "Negative, sir. All channels are jammed. Solid wall of white noise across the spectrum." The lights in the TOC flickered violently, then dimmed to half-strength as the emergency generators kicked in with a deep, shuddering groan. The main tactical map, which had shown a detailed God's-eye view of the battlefield, dissolved into a pixelated mess, then went completely black. They were blind. They were deaf. The technological superiority that gave them their edge had been severed in an instant. "Perimeter defense," Madsen roared, turning to another operator. "Report, sir. The automated turrets are offline. The sensor grid is down. I'm getting phantom readings all along the southern wire. It's a coordinated attack, sir. It's cyber-physical." The room was a maelstrom of shouted reports and frantic, useless keystrokes. Men trained to dominate any battle space were reduced to fumbling in the dark, their multi-million-dollar systems rendered inert. Madsen's face was a grim mask of fury and helplessness. He was a commander who had lost his ability to command. Then a single fragmented transmission punched through the static for a brief moment. The voice was strained, punctuated by the crack of gunfire. "Spectre 1, ambush, Tangi Pass, heavy contact, RPGs. We are pinned down, taking casualties." The transmission died, swallowed again by the static. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the alarms. Spectre team was trapped. The convoy, their most valuable asset, was a sitting duck. And the TOC, the nerve center of the entire province, was a tomb. Major Evans stared at the dead screens. "They knew, sir. They knew the convoy's route, and they knew our vulnerabilities. They sliced through our firewalls like they had the master key. Madsen slammed his fist on the central console. The gesture was one of pure, impotent rage. "Get it back online! Get me my team!" But his operators could do nothing. Every attempt to reboot the system, every diagnostic they ran, led to a locked-out screen. The enemy wasn't just jamming them, they had infiltrated the core of the network. They owned it.
Amidst the chaos, one corner of the room remained an island of calm. Dr. Aerys Thorne had not moved. She had not shouted. When the screens had gone dark, she had simply unplugged her console from the base's primary network jack. From her satchel, she produced a tangle of wires, a small custom-built interface, and a set of alligator clips. While Madsen was screaming orders and his men were chasing digital ghosts, she was on her knees, prying open a floor panel that hadn't been touched in 20 years. She found what she was looking for, a thick, dust-covered copper cable, the old analog telephone trunk line. She clipped her interface onto the raw wires, her movements precise and economical. She bypassed the compromised digital network entirely, plugging her console directly into the forgotten copper skeleton of the base. Her screen flickered to life, not with the sophisticated graphics of the main system, but with a simple text-based command prompt. It was an archaic interface, slow and unforgiving, but it was clean, it was secure, it was hers. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing lines of code that hadn't been used in decades. She wasn't trying to fight the enemy on their terms in the digital realm they now controlled. She was stepping outside the battlefield.
First, power. The attackers had shut down the main grid, but the emergency generators were still running. They had simply been disconnected from the command systems. Aerys wrote a simple script sending a series of low-voltage pulses through the copper line, mimicking the analog command signals of the old manual breaker system. Deep in the bowels of the base, a series of heavy relays, thick with dust, slammed shut with a deafening clang. The lights in the TOC flickered again, then returned to full, steady brightness. A stunned silence fell over the room. The operator stared at the lights, then at each other. Madsen looked around, bewildered. What was that? Engineering, report! But there was no one to answer.
Aerys ignored them. She was already on to the next problem, communications. The radio spectrum was hopelessly jammed, but high above them, military satellites were still tracing their silent orbits. The attackers had locked the base's transceivers, but they hadn't blinded the satellites themselves. Accessing them was the problem. She rerouted a sliver of the restored power to a decommissioned radio mast at the edge of the base, a relic intended for long-range Morse code. Its systems were purely mechanical, immune to the digital attack. Using her primitive connection, she began uploading a tiny, tightly compressed data packet, a handshake protocol of her own design. It was a digital needle in a global haystack. She sent it not to the standard military communications constellation, but to an older, semi-retired network of weather and imaging satellites, a network she had helped design the security protocols for years ago, a network for which she still held the master key. One of the satellites, designated KH-14B, answered. On her small screen, a new line of text appeared. Connection established, awaiting command. She began to type again, her rhythm steady and unbroken. She wasn't just a logistics analyst. She was a ghost in the machine, and she was about to haunt the people who had tried to bury her command center. While Madsen and his team stared at their inert, high-tech consoles, Aerys Thorne was fighting a war on a battlefield they couldn't even see. Her small, text-only screen was a blizzard of information she was pulling from the sky. She tasked the KH-14B satellite, repositioning its thermal imaging array over the Tangi Valley Pass. Raw data began to stream down, not as a clean, processed video feed, but as lines of hexadecimal code representing heat signatures. To anyone else, it would have been gibberish. To Aerys, it was a language. She saw the hot bloom of Spectre Team's disabled vehicles. She saw the cluster of smaller individual heat signatures, the pinned-down operators. And she saw the other signatures spread out in a classic L-shaped ambush. 12 of them.
2 more on the ridgeline with heavier weapons, RPGs. They were boxing Spectre team in, preparing for the final assault. She had sight, but she still had no voice. She couldn't transmit complex data or voice commands through her tenuous link. She needed a way to talk to them. She switched her focus, rerouting her connection through another satellite, this one a signals intelligence bird. She began scanning the jammed radio spectrum, not looking for a way through the wall of noise, but for a hole in it. The enemy's jamming was powerful, but it wasn't perfect. It was a brute force attack, flooding the airwaves with garbage. Like any flood, it had eddies and currents. She found one, a narrow, fluctuating frequency band, just fractions of a kilohertz wide, that was intermittently clear. It was too unstable for voice, but it was enough for data. She wrote a microburst transmission protocol, a digital version of Morse code. Short, sharp packets of information, timed to hit the frequency during its fleeting clear moments. It was slow, painstaking work. Back in the TOC, Major Evans had managed to get a single laptop working on a closed-circuit internal network. It was useless for communicating with the outside, but it allowed him to see internal system logs. He saw a massive power surge from the emergency generators rerouted through an obsolete junction box. He saw a massive data draw from the decommissioned comms mast. He followed the digital breadcrumbs, and they all led to one place, the small, forgotten console in the corner. He walked over, his boots loud in the tense silence. He stood behind Aerys, watching her screen. It was a cascade of incomprehensible text. "Doctor, what are you doing?" Aerys didn't look up. Her focus was absolute. "Re-establishing command and control, Major." Her fingers tapped out another command. On the dead main screen at the front of the room, a single line of green text suddenly appeared against the black background. "Spectre 1, this is Jericho TOC. Do you read? Stand by for data. K." The entire room froze. Every eye snapped to the screen. Madsen took 2 steps forward, his mouth agape. "How?" Aerys ignored him. She began transmitting the thermal data translated into a simple grid overlay. "Spectre 1, acknowledge. Enemy positions follow. Grid ref 4EVJ. Hostile 1 at your 10 o'clock, 50 meters behind rock outcrop. Hostile 2 at your 11 o'clock, 70 meters elevated. 2-man RPG team on ridge, your 2 o'clock, 300 meters. She was painting a picture for them, calling out targets one by one. She was their eyes. A moment later, a new line of text appeared on the screen, this one blinking. "Jericho, this is Spectre 1. Solid copy. Data received. How the hell are you doing this? K."
Madsen stared at Aerys, then at the screen, his mind struggling to comprehend. This woman, this quiet analyst he had dismissed as a useless bureaucrat, had single-handedly resurrected his command center from the dead. She had bypassed a sophisticated military-grade cyber attack using what looked like junk parts and forgotten infrastructure. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a low growl of disbelief and dawning awe. Aerys finished typing a command, directing the satellite to scan for approaching enemy reinforcements. Only then did she finally pause and turn to look at him. Her eyes, magnified slightly by her glasses, were calm and clear. There was no triumph in them, no hint of, "I told you so." There was only the quiet focus of a professional at work. "I'm a logistics analyst, Colonel," she said simply. "I analyze the flow of resources. Your most critical resource right now is information. I am restoring the flow."
Before Madsen could respond, a new event preempted him. The main communications panel, dormant for the past hour, suddenly blared to life with the piercing shriek of a Priority 1 override signal. This wasn't a call from a local unit. This was a signal that bypassed all standard protocols, coming directly from the highest levels of the global command network. It was the digital equivalent of God picking up the phone. The largest screen in the TOC, which had been stubbornly black, flickered and resolved into a secure video conference window. 5 faces appeared, each framed by the sterile background of a Pentagon briefing room. They were all 4-star generals.
In the center was General Vance, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his face a granite mask of grave concern. The entire room snapped to attention, a collective intake of breath. Madsen and Evans stood ramrod straight, their minds reeling. A call from the chairman himself in the middle of a base-wide crisis was unheard of. General Vance's eyes scanned the TOC, taking in the scene of controlled chaos. He ignored Colonel Madsen completely. His gaze swept past the other operators and settled on the small, unassuming woman sitting in the corner. His expression softened just for a fraction of a second with something that looked like relief. "Oracle? Status report," Vance said, his voice booming through the TOC speakers, crisp and clear. "Is Jericho's Veil protocol active?" The name hung in the air, electric and heavy. Oracle. A wave of shock rippled through the room. The Spectre operators exchanged wide-eyed glances. Major Evans felt a cold dread mix with dawning comprehension. Colonel Madsen felt the floor drop out from beneath him. He knew that name. Everyone at a certain command level knew that name. Oracle was a legend, a ghost story whispered about in secure briefing rooms. Oracle was the call sign of the mysterious architect of the entire global strategic defense network, the interlocking system of satellites, cyber defenses, and communication protocols that the entire U.S. military relied upon. The system was nicknamed the Veil. Oracle was the one who had designed its deepest failsafes, its most secret backdoors, its most elegant and lethal countermeasures. The figure was spoken of in mythical terms, a reclusive genius who had foreseen the future of warfare and built the tools to fight it. The official story was that Oracle had retired almost a decade ago, vanishing into civilian life under a blanket of the highest possible security classification. No one knew Oracle's real name. No one knew what they looked like. They were just a legend. And General Vance had just called Dr. Aerys Thorne, the quiet, middle-aged logistics analyst, Oracle. Aerys turned back to her console, her focus unbroken. She keyed her microphone, her voice patching through the strange, cobbled-together system she had built, and now, apparently, through the chairman's priority channel. "General," she said, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos of the last hour. "This is Oracle. Acknowledged. The attack penetrated the Veil's outer layers. The Jericho network is compromised and quarantined. I have activated a tertiary failsafe protocol, Chimera. I am currently running command and control through an isolated analog system. Spectre team is pinned down in the Tangi Pass, but I have established a microburst data link and am providing tactical oversight." The 5 generals on the screen listened, their expressions grim but attentive. They were not talking to a subordinate. They were conferring with an equal, or perhaps even a superior. They were here to help her. "What do you need from us, Oracle?" Vance asked. It was a question, not an order. "I need you to blind them," Aerys said, her fingers already typing a new set of commands. "The attackers are using a compromised Russian comms satellite, Cosmos 2479, to coordinate their attack and route their signals. I'm sending you the exploit code now. Use your assets at Fort Meade to execute it. It will disable the satellite's primary transponder for precisely 12 minutes. That will be my window." "Consider it done," Vance said, without hesitation. "Stand by, Oracle." The generals turned to their own aides, barking orders. The full weight of the global U.S. military apparatus was now moving to execute the command of the woman in the corner of the room.
Colonel Madsen stood frozen, watching this exchange. The reality of the situation was crashing down on him with the force of a physical blow. He had dismissed her. He had insulted her. He had relegated the single most important strategic asset on the continent to a dusty corner and told her to stay out of the way. His career wasn't just over. He had become a footnote in a story that was so far above his pay grade he couldn't even see the top. The atmosphere in the TOC had undergone a profound chemical change. The smirks of the Spectre operators had been replaced by expressions of pure, unadulterated awe. They were watching a living myth at work.
The frantic energy of the analysts had been replaced by a focused silence as they watched the main screen, which was now Aerys Thorne's personal display. They were all students in her classroom now. Madsen slowly, deliberately walked over to the main command chair where his senior comms officer was sitting, staring uselessly at his dead equipment. Madsen didn't say a word. He just tapped the man on the shoulder. The officer looked up, confused, and then scrambled out of the chair as if it were on fire. The colonel turned to Aerys. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, hoarse, and stripped of all its earlier arrogance. It was the voice of a man who understood he was in the presence of a master. "The floor is yours, ma'am." Aerys gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. She moved from the small, cramped console to the main command chair, the nexus of the entire room. It was like watching a king reclaim a throne that had been temporarily occupied by a lesser regent. She plugged her custom interface into the main console's auxiliary port, and in moments, the large dead screens in front of her flickered to life, mirroring the text-based display of her own laptop. The entire TOC was now her instrument. "Spectre 1, she said, her voice now broadcast with perfect clarity into the helmets of the soldiers trapped in the valley. "This is Oracle. The enemy's command and control will be going dark in approximately 90 seconds. On my mark, you will execute a fighting withdrawal to the west toward the secondary extraction point at grid ref 4-E-U-H. I am tasking an armed drone to that location, but it will not have live feed. I will be guiding its munitions manually." The reply from the Spectre team leader came back instantly, his voice filled with a new, unwavering confidence. "Acknowledged, Oracle. We've never been so happy to hear a voice in our lives. We're standing by for your mark." The casual use of her legendary call sign was the ultimate sign of respect. They knew who she was now, and they trusted her completely.
Aerys' hands moved with an unnerving grace and speed. She was a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of violence. On one screen, she monitored the countdown to the satellite takedown. On another, she was writing firing solutions for a Reaper drone flying blind hundreds of miles away, inputting the commands manually based on the thermal data she was receiving. On a third, she was mapping the safest path for Spectre's retreat, predicting enemy movements and laying virtual tripwires for them. "General Vance," she said without looking at the video feed, "the exploit is uploaded. Execute now." "Executing," Vance's voice confirmed. Far above the Earth, a string of code shot from a ground station in Maryland, leaped to a satellite, and then beamed across the globe to Cosmos 2479. The Russian satellite's systems hiccuped. Its transponder went dead. On the ground in the Tangi Valley, the effect was instantaneous. The enemy fighters who had been coordinating their assault with ruthless efficiency were suddenly deaf. Their earpieces went silent. Their commanders could no longer see the battlefield. Confusion rippled through their ranks. "Mark," Aerys said, her voice cutting through the silence of the TOC. "Spectre, execute. Go now." In the valley, Spectre team erupted into action. They laid down a volley of suppressing fire toward the positions Aerys had identified and began pulling back, moving with the speed and precision of elite soldiers. "RPG team on the ridge is repositioning," Aerys announced, her eyes locked on the thermal data. "They're trying to get a clear shot on your withdrawal route. Reapers in position, firing solution locked, danger close. Spectre, get your heads down." She pressed the enter key. Half a world away, a Hellfire missile dropped from the wing of a drone. It flew for several seconds, guided not by a laser or camera, but by a set of coordinates typed by a woman in a command center that was, for all intents and purposes, still offline. In the TOC, they could only see the data. 2 bright heat signatures on the ridgeline vanished, replaced by a much larger expanding bloom of white-hot energy. The voice of Spectre's leader came over the comm, breathless but steady. "Good hit, Oracle. Good hit." Jesus Christ, that was directly on top of them.
For the next 12 minutes, Aerys Thorne dismantled the ambush with surgical precision. She was a master strategist, a sniper with a satellite, a commander with perfect information.
She guided Spectre team through the treacherous terrain, calling out enemy positions before they could fire a shot. She used the Reaper to eliminate threats, her commands so fast and accurate it was as if she were controlling it with her mind. The enemy, blinded and disorganized, fell into disarray, picked off one by one, unable to comprehend how their unseen enemies suddenly knew their every move. The 12 minutes ended. The Russian satellite came back online, but it was too late. The battle was over. Spectre 1 to Oracle, the team leader's voice reported, laced with exhaustion and relief. We are at the secondary extraction point. We are secure. All personnel accounted for. The asset is safe. Solid copy, Spectre, Aerys replied. Sit tight. A quick reaction force is on its way to you. Standard recovery protocols are now in effect. She turned to Colonel Matson. Colonel, my work here is done. Your primary systems should be back online within the hour. The enemy has been routed. I suggest you get your QRF in the air. She was handing command back to him. The crisis was over. She began to quietly unplug her equipment, her part in the drama finished. Matson simply stared at her, then nodded slowly. He turned and began barking orders. His voice was once again that of a commander, but its tone was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sober, focused authority. He had been humbled, and in that humility, he had become a better leader. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the dust-choked sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange. The long night was over. The command center, which hours before had been a scene of frantic panic, was now quiet. The hum of the fully restored systems was a comforting sound. The operators, exhausted but alive with adrenaline, were methodically logging after-action reports. The 5 generals had signed off, their final words a simple, profound, "Thank you, Oracle." The members of Spectre team, safely back on base, had made a point to walk through the TOC before heading to debrief. They didn't say anything to Aerys. They simply stopped near her console, each of the hardened operators meeting her gaze and giving a slow, deliberate nod of respect. It was a gesture more meaningful than any medal. Aerys Thorne sat alone at her corner console, the one she had first been assigned. She had declined the offer of the command chair, preferring her own quiet space. She was meticulously cleaning her glasses with a small microfiber cloth, her movements patient and methodical. The chaos, the battle, the revelation, all of it had been processed and filed away. She was back in her own world of quiet observation. She had saved the base. She had saved the convoy. She had saved dozens of lives. She had revealed herself to be one of the most important strategic figures in the modern military. And now she was just a woman cleaning her glasses. Colonel Matson approached her, moving quietly as if not to disturb her. He held 2 heavy ceramic mugs. He placed one on the console beside her. It was filled with fresh black coffee. The steam curled up into the cool air of the TOC. He stood there for a long moment, searching for the right words. Apology, gratitude, awe. They all felt inadequate. He had misjudged her so completely, so fundamentally, that any attempt to explain it would only sound like a pathetic excuse. He had seen a librarian and ignored the mind of a grand master. In the end, he said nothing. Words were insufficient. He just looked at her, his expression conveying a depth of respect that was absolute and unconditional. He had been dismissed by his superiors in front of his own men. His command had been rendered irrelevant, and it had been the most important lesson of his career. He had learned the difference between authority and power. He had the rank, she had the power. Aerys picked up the mug, her small hand wrapping around its warmth. She looked up at him and gave him that same small, almost imperceptible nod she had given him before. It was an acceptance, not of an apology, but of his new understanding. The transaction was complete. Respect had been earned and paid in full. She put on her glasses, her vision once again sharp and clear.
She turned her gaze back to the screen, which was now displaying a logistical schematic of supply routes for the entire theater of operations. She took a slow sip of the coffee. The enemy had been defeated in this battle, but the war, the endless, complex war of systems and resources, continued, and her work was never done. The quiet logistician was back on the job.